of the organization. I have to start off today's briefing with kind of a double or triple apology. First of all, Erica Edelson, who is our usually our host for the briefings, she's on the call, but she's got to kind of stay a little quiet because she has COVID. So Erica's nursing back her health. Second thing is that one of our two speakers, Dan, who was going to be talking about Dan Osborne, his race for the Senate in Nebraska, a remarkable race. There was a time zone misunderstanding, we'll say, between Dan's staff and us. And they only let us know about that yesterday with great apologies. But because of that, he had another obligation. So Dan is unable to join us today. I do hope we can get him back either on his own or as part of a panel in the future. But I know many of you were very excited to hear from him. Eric and I had a chance to hear from him in another setting a few days back, and believe me, it's worth listening to him. And then here's the third apology. At the moment, our second speaker is also not with us. Sarah is maybe joining us at the halfway mark because the original plan was for Dan to speak in the first half and Sarah in the second half. But at this moment,
Hi, everybody.
Mamma mia!
I just got the message I was supposed to be on. I'm like, oh, let me get on.
Oh, so cool. I kept looking and looking and looking for your name. Have you been on the whole time?
No, I just got on. I just got out of a meeting and just hustled over. Yeah.
Okay, so cool. All right, great. So I only needed a double apology. The triple was over top. Okay, so we are going to begin with Sarah. Here's what we're going to do.
Okay. Yeah.
Sarah's going to make a short presentation, actually as much time as you'd like, since there's only one speaker, and then we will open it up to Q&A. And that will constitute the bulk of the briefing, but there's also a really exciting development at Ruby that has to do with the newly elected Democratic National Committee. And I will take about 10 minutes towards the end of the hour to tell you about that and also tell you how you can be involved with that, hoping that everybody will. So Jackie, are we recording yet? If not, we do want to hit recording here in a moment because we want to hear every word that Sarah has to say. So I'm just going to briefly give an introduction to Sarah. This is the first time we've met, and I'm thrilled about it. Sarah Keyeski, am I saying that correctly?
Thank you.
Great. Sarah Keyeski is a Democratic state senator from Wisconsin who just recently, as like last November, when all of us were depressed, Sarah was not, because she defeated a Republican incumbent in a rural district in Wisconsin, and she's now a member of the state Senate. She has rural roots. She grew up on a dairy farm. She's been actively involved in the community in a number of ways, including an organization, a community service group called Lift Lodi, which is it Lodi or Lodi?
Lodi.
Lodi. Lift Lodi, which she founded. And she is a licensed professional counselor. And so her day job is working with folks, dealing with all kinds of challenges to do with emotional mental health. So Sarah is somebody who's got a lot of different and diverse experiences that qualify her well to be a member of our governing body. And that's all I need to say. I'll just turn it over to you, Sarah.
Well, I apologize if I'm supposed to have a presentation. This is news to me. I just was going to maybe chat and answer questions for y'all. So let me just give you a little background. You did a great job introducing, so thank you. As you mentioned, I am brand new to politics. So I was elected in November, inaugurated January 6th. So it's like a month tomorrow, I think, that I've been in office already. So this has been just like such a surreal journey and wild ride. And I'm still really trying to wrap my brain around it all, to be honest, because it is so new to me. So I'll just give you a little bit of background, kind of how I got here, what happened. And I don't know that I have any like great ideas that like everybody should implement. I mean, I think every journey, every campaign, every year, everything's all unique. So I'll just tell you about my story, maybe some of the things that I took from it or things that I learned. But again, I open it up to you guys asking questions. I'll do my best to answer. Um, I again live in a small town. I grew up on a dairy farm, and my parents, good parents, you know, sort of salt of the earth people, but not necessarily terribly political, but did always care a bit about who is running. But I would say they were a bit more sort of independent, what year, who's running for the presidency. But didn't have a lot, you know, kind of sort of the average voter, if you will, that kind of paid attention mostly to the presidential races. And so grew up, was always a little bit, again, paying attention to politics. I'm kind of interested in it, but not in any deep way where I took poli-sci classes or majored or anything like that, just aware and caring about my community. So went off to school, and I thought I was going to be a big city person because I grew up in a small farm, and I thought, oh my gosh, I think once I get out of here, I'm going to be a big city person. I went off to Chicago and studied, and got my master's degree in counseling psychology. And then time over time, I ended up blending my family with my now husband. He had 2 boys. I had a son. We had another son, and then we had identical twin girls. So we have a blended family of 6 kids. And as we were raising them, I became more, I guess, enamored, if you will, with the idea of returning to small town roots, wanting to raise my children in a small town like what I was raised in. So we ended up moving from a little bit bigger suburb to this small town called Lodi that we live in now. It's about 3,000 people. And when we decided to move there, really the idea was to raise our children in a small town. And with that, I just wanted to be involved in the community. So I, you know, participated in any kind of committee that I could. There's something that's called Lodi Community Action Team. And then I was involved with doing some stuff with the school board, like just helping people get elected, and just caring again about the community and trying to participate. And then COVID hit. And right before that, I should add, I've been a mental health provider, providing counseling, individual, family, and couples therapy. And just right around COVID, I opened a private practice in addition, in this small town that I'm talking about. And that was really just as my kids got a little older, I needed to work full time because some of my kids were going out to college, honestly, and decided instead of working for the hospital that I had been working for part-time, instead of working there full-time, I decided to open a private practice in the small town, really wanting to provide mental health services locally and in a cost-effective way where they could get experienced psychotherapy. So I've been a psychotherapist 25 years. COVID happened, and this little town that I had brought my children into really felt very divided about all the things that were happening on the political and the COVID-19, the pandemic, and how that was influencing towns. And for our particular town, and like many, there was a lot of conflict about mask mandates, what was happening with the schools, etc. And honestly, I was really disappointed in living there, having my children grow up in a town like that was so fractured. And I saw so much mental health despair, really, so many people in despair. And so for me, I know that one of the things that I sort of just naturally kind of gravitate to is, if I'm struggling, I need to kind of figure out how can I do something to help the situation, to sort of an activist in that way. I would have never really called myself that originally, but decided then to start a nonprofit, which you heard about. And that was really the idea of bringing our community together, and wanting to sort of like try to bridge gaps, try to like mend fences, if you will, to have everybody who was willing to participate really help to uplift this little town that we all are in and love, and say, how can we do that together? And so we worked on all these projects around town, like planting trees and cleaning out the creek and washing the windows at the library and whatever. So all these volunteers came out for a day of service. First year, we had 200 volunteers from this small town. The second year, we had 250. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity to see that people really care, people want to participate. And it was a lovely thing for our town. What happened inadvertently, this was in 2023, is that doing that, people that are on the inside of the political world, they are always looking to recruit people to run for hard to win districts. And so I got recruited. I got recruited to run for, in our state, an assembly race. And that assembly race was before we had new maps. Now, I don't know if you've watched what's happened in Wisconsin, but we got new maps in March of 2024. So I was asked to run for this non-winnable 18-point spread Republican leaning district. But at the time, participation for me, doing what I could with the skills that I have, and trying to help uptick it at the time was really kind of what seduced me to be willing to run for office, even though I wouldn't win, but willing to put my hat in the ring and say, hey, this is going to be really important. I wanted to make sure that we had Democratic win. So Tammy Baldwin is in my state. At the time, obviously, President Biden was running, and I was terrified of any other option than a Democratic president. So I was willing to run. From there, we got the new maps. Within the week that we got new maps, I guess I would say there's conversations in the background that I didn't really have much knowledge about. People that are in the throes of the political sphere had decided that if I was willing, they would like me to step into the Senate race, which was much different. I had been running in a non-winnable 18-point, like I said, spread, Republican leaning. I all of a sudden was running in almost a 50-50 district against an incumbent. It might have leaned like just a touch with Democratic. It depends on what historical election you're looking at. So pretty shocking to actually kind of think about really running for something that was going to potentially be a job. But it didn't really change how dedicated I was to the idea. It just changed my mindset about like, well, you know, am I really willing to like go all in? Because if I'm going to go all in, I'm going to go all in. That's just how I roll. And I had the potential then of getting a new job, and had to figure that out for myself, what that would mean. The thing that I decided was, as a mental health provider, I really, have felt really compelled in a heart of service to really help people individually and in couples and families, like I said. And what I figured out is the way that for me running for office kind of made the most sense was, if I'm working as a mental health provider, working kind of on the ground in that way, if I become a legislator, what might be possible is, instead of sort of helping to pull people out of the river from drowning when they've fallen in, maybe as a policy person that hopefully can help make some things happen in the state, I can go upstream and hopefully help people from falling in. And so that was the way that, for me, it was a tie, that something that was non-politically oriented, but really could see the connection of why I would do this and how it resonated with me personally. And then that was the story that I told on the campaign trail, really. So did that, ran a hard, busy race, and those might be the questions that you want to ask about. I'm not sure what would be helpful, but just sort of went everywhere, did everything I could think of to do. And then November, we got the news that we had won the race by about 2%. And so it was wonderful for our district, because we had not had Democratic representation for many, many, many years, like 20-ish or something, most of that district. And so many people were really, really excited. But because I went against and won against an incumbent, it was a very, I would say, mean mean on the other side. I got attacked a lot from the other side, so it was pretty contentious. And now I'm in the role learning, like I said, so new, but the great thing is I love to learn, so it's been really actually quite fun and interesting. And yeah, I'm just trying to do my best to be the best legislator I can as a new person on the block. And I'm trying to figure out what that means for me. So that's sort of my story, if you will, in a little, in a bit of a timeline.
Yeah.
And I guess I would be open to, like, if you have questions for me, like what would be most helpful for me to share with your group. I'd be happy to do my best to be helpful.
Sure, we've already got some folks raising their hand, and I'll encourage others to do that. And sometimes I don't see the raised hand, so you can also put a question in the chat. I'm going to start it off, and then I'll get to Bruce, who has a question. A couple of things about the district. You said it was the result of this new map that eliminated the prior gerrymandering that had really so badly influenced Wisconsin. Tell us just a little more about the district itself, the livelihoods, the people. You said
Yeah.
it was pretty close to 50-50. And also, I'd be interested if you know this, in 2024, did the district move towards or away from Trump in the presidential vote, if you know the numbers for that?
Yeah. I don't know exactly the numbers. So the district is about 157,000 people. That's about what our district sizes are in state Senate. This district has a bit of Dane County. If you know Dane County, Dane County has Madison. And so it has like the northern part of Dane County, just a small kind of sliver, but then it really is a bit, so it goes some Dane County and it goes up into a little bit of suburban, and then it's really mostly like small towns. It's mostly rural. So I have two full counties. One is Sauk County, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Sauk County. Sauk County is like the battleground of all battlegrounds they've talked about. Sauk County is 50-50. It is purple, purple, purple. And so many people were watching that particular county, what we were doing here, what was happening here, because it's just one of those like pinnacle counties where who they vote for is kind of where the trend is. And so I have that county, I have Richland County, that's very agricultural, quite poor actually. And then there's some other counties, portions of counties. I have learned that there's pieces of 30 different school districts in the Senate district that I have. And this district went let's see, I'm trying to think. I don't know. Oh, shoot, the person that was in here early might have known. It went for Trump. The district it did. And it went for Tammy Baldwin and me.
Interesting.
So yeah, and Tammy Baldwin has always historically had a pretty great way of connecting sort of the purpleness of our state. She's been somebody that has been people have gravitated toward her from kind of both sides of the aisle, I would say. And so thankfully she won. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, very much so. So we've got three people in the queue right now. We're going to start with Bruce Menke.
Yes, well, first, obviously, congratulations. But the first question actually is, why are you a Democrat? And the second question is, why do you think the district so consistently was so red?
Well, the district before me was so red. And again, so the way the map changed is so it had been almost all rural. I got a little bit more of like a suburban, suburban and a slight bit of the city, well, not even quite the city, but the suburb of Madison. So that helped. But I also, in a couple of the counties, so there's a part of Adams County and part of Juneau County that actually did better than Tammy Baldwin and Kamala Harris. And so I don't know, right? I mean, so much speculation about, well, did some people, vote for me because they could see like the value of somebody that was local, had my history, but they still voted maybe for Trump, or did they just not vote for her up ticket, but they voted for me? I don't know enough about the
Well, could I
how
just
to parse it all out.
could I refine the question?
Sure.
Why is there such a significant difference between the more urban part of your district and the more rural part? This is the question which is puzzling so many people.
Yeah, no, it puzzles me too, honestly, because I grew up on a dairy farm, small dairy farm. I grew up Lutheran, and I grew up a strong Democrat. I mean, my dad, my mom, I think, kind of more followed what my dad kind of who he voted for, but our values were really about the collective good. I think that's what I grew up with. When your neighbors, fields need to be brought in, but there's an injury on that farm, you go and you help your neighbor. We did crop walks when I was younger, where you gather money in these little foldable things, and you did your crop walk and it went to a third world country. I mean, that was what I grew up with. I grew up with going to mission trips. I mean, so I don't understand, honestly, how because what's happened is our rural area, our farmers have really leaned in toward Trump. And I've tried to understand it too. The impression I get, and again, I'm not somebody that fully understands it, but this belief that comes to this rugged individualism that is the synonymous, persona that I think some of the farmers kind of connect with, rather than government overreach and being told what to do, right? Is kind of like sort of it seems like the ethos in the area. But what's so strange about it, as I'm now in the position I'm in, I see how much there's this connection between, okay, we have a farm bill, right? And the farm bill pays a lot of money for WIC, SNAP, school meals. And so there's this, yes, urban areas use a lot of those, but that is then funding much of what's happening in our rural communities. I just don't think there's a connection. I feel like there's this disconnection, I ask this question actually all the time. I'm like, I don't understand how farmers are not Democratic. I simply don't, because my dad was, and I don't understand. So I wish I could give you a better answer. But my sense is also that being a farmer has been hard, right? Profit margins are low. It's tumultuous as far as climate, as far as trade. And I think and this is just from a psychological perspective, when we're afraid, when we're angry, we take the easiest solution, because that's how we work as beings. Our brain just wants something simple, something fast. It wants clarity. It wants a plan. And when somebody says, I will fix it, I will do it, I know all things, I think that's seductive for some people that are afraid and angry. That's my theory.
Thanks, Sarah. And that question that Bruce asks is pretty much the founding question of the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, which we grapple with all the time. We've got a couple more people in the queue, and then there's also several related questions in the chat. So I'm going to ask Pam to go next, and then I'm going to switch over to the chat and summarize a couple of questions there. Go ahead, Pam.
Sarah, I wanted to know how you handled the negativity. I guess I'm assuming your opponent was a man. No. Oh, okay. Well, anyway,
No, it's a woman.
I would like to know how you handled that. And I would also like to know, how did you handle, I assume you had to, these real hot button culture issues like trans people in sports and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess let me start with the first one. I was really surprised how little people talked about those issues at the doors. I thought I would have to be like, oh, like blocking and weaving all the time. That wasn't the case at all. I think, there's it was very interesting how many people, this was the other theory that I had going into it that ended up not being true. I thought going into it, telling people I was a mental health provider would not work out well because, I'm not a business person. Well, I have a private practice, a small business, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, a politician that's had another position. And I really thought that would be, a non-selling point. And I thought I'd have to lean into something, I don't know, like my farm roots, which is, a piece. But it turns out mental health was a sort of quote unquote winning or appreciated issue on both sides of the aisle. Everyone I talked to, oh my gosh, sometimes it started with the joke, oh my gosh, you're going to have a handful when you get in there, right? You're in the right field, everybody's crazy. But it was more an appreciation for how mental health issues have really affected everyone. This is post pandemic. I think just everyone has this awareness, this slightly less stigma. It's touched families of all, iterations. And so that was really interesting. And I will also say that I think, of course, like sort of the really extremist MAGA people, I mean, they're not going to care for me, but anybody that wasn't in that like category, was willing to hear, I'm not a politician. I mean, that's just a fact, right? And I really want to work across the aisle because the other thing that I would tell people that would resonate, which again, it was interesting because I would just say stuff and then all of a sudden like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm like, oh, well, it's just true. But one of the things I would say is, as a therapist, I have to be, if you will, bipartisan. I can't have, if I'm a therapist and I have a woman and a man in my office as a couple, I can't go, oh, the woman, she's right. And you're just a, brute, or vice versa. Oh my gosh, you're so charming and you're so lovely. And she's just, nag. Instead, my role has always been, we have to work together to find something that works for both of you. We have to be in a relationship, but I don't necessarily have a perfect idea of what that's going to look like for you, but we need to figure it out. And I think that's true for our districts. I think that's true for our states, right? I don't have a perfect idea of what this should look like. What I know is I will listen and I will do my best to hear from all sides and try to compromise. And I'm not puritanical. I don't believe in binary thinking, right, wrong, black, white, simplistic. I think that's emotionally immature and unhealthy. And so those were the ways I would talk to people. I'm like, and so I think that resonated, that I'm a Democrat and I'm a proud Democrat, but I don't think Democrats have all the answers. I don't think all Republicans are idiots. And I think, again, if I come to what I would say with the therapy, I would say, here's my focus. My focus is the relationship. That's my client. And I have the man and the woman that I have to work with to figure out how to benefit this. That's how I see my job here. I'm a Democrat. I'm going to work with Republicans because my goal is the constituents. My goal, my client, if you will, is my state. When we do better, we all do better, right? And so again, that's how I would think about it. That's how I talked about it. And that was something that was helpful. So I guess I don't know if I answered your question, but that was one of the questions. What was the other one? Sorry, this is what happens. I talk.
That's good. We have several more, so we'll move on. That was great.
Okay,
It's actually one of the things Ruby contends all the time from our own experience. Some of us have run for office, as well as our research, is that the kind of extreme MAGA voter that has become the face of the right to most liberals, they're real, they're scary, but they're the minority. They're not the majority of people on the other side. So
Exactly.
I'm going to paraphrase two sets of questions from the chat, and then we'll go to Michael, and after Michael, Warner, both who have their hands raised. So there's one set of questions about, and I'm going to tell you both, and I can remind you what. One is basically, did you run the same campaign in the rural small town areas as you did in Dane County or more urban suburban areas? And if not, what were the differences? Did you talk different to any of that? That's one. So was there kind of a rural strategy to the campaign and a non-rural? The second is about the issues themselves. We've had 2 or 3 questions. One question is simply, what were your key issues that you ran on, if
Okay.
you were? And the second was, were you pressured at all by the state party or anybody else to lift up kind of traditional Democratic talking point issues on social, cultural, hot issues? Or were you free to just keep the issue profile that you wanted, say focus locally, whatever? So maybe start with, was there a difference between your rural running and style and urban suburban? And then the second, tell us about the issues you ran on.
Okay, so there wasn't a difference for me of how I ran. I'm one person and I present my one personhood, you know, and so I wasn't different. I would be the same everywhere I went. And I shared the same message. I am really here to help as many people as I can. And you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. So I didn't change my messaging, and who I am is also broadly all of that. And I got lucky because I grew up rurally, right? But I've lived in Chicago. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Minneapolis, and I've lived in Lodi, and I've lived in Cashton. So like I have a breadth of experience, I suppose, that informs me. So I can kind of, and partially I'm a mental health therapist, I can kind of talk to a old grumpy farmer, and I can talk to somebody that's maybe a little bit thinks they're a little something special, right? So like, I'm like, oh, whatever, we're all people. And so like, none of that really changed who I would come across as. And so, you know, I think that was a little bit comforting to people, because my social media was one of the things that I thought was really important. Facebook, really a little bit of Instagram and stuff. But I was just me on that. And I think that was what was appreciated. It was very real and raw, and I didn't know how that would go. But when I was asked to run, what I told them is, all I know how to do is be true to who I am. And if I lose that, I have no integrity and I don't want to run. So if you ask me to be somebody other than who I am, no, thank you. I said, as much as you're vetting me, I'm vetting you. Because if you're going to be the type that kind of put the screws to me, you know, and try to, like, I'll leave. I don't need this. This is not my aspiration. I have a really good life, right? But I'm willing to do this because I believe in it so much. But you're going to have to believe in me. And if you've seen me run, so it had been maybe 5-ish months of this assembly campaign, I said, that's who I'm going to still be as a Senate candidate. The great thing is that that's who they wanted me to be. They said, we don't want you to be anybody else. We want you to be you. And so that was such a relief, because if it had been any other answer, I would have been like, well, okay, thanks, but no thanks, because I could not have done that.
Okay.
And so I got lucky with regard to that. And then the issues I would talk about really were the same thing, no matter where I went. And again, across the board, it resonated. The 3 things that I would talk about the most: mental health, public schools, and our small towns. Because if we can, you know, we can enrich our bigger, we can think about our big cities, and I think they get plenty of attention, and that's lovely, and they need that revenue and all that. Our small towns don't get enough of a voice. Our small towns that give us a rich texture to our state don't get heard enough. And so that, to me, has been the part that I've been advocating. I'm like, I'm a small town girl. I'm raising my kids in small town. I want small town to live and thrive. And so I want them to be economically viable. I want kids to not have to move away into a city if they don't want to, so that parents can stay connected to their kids or help raise their grandchildren. That's going to be so important, again, for the mental health and the economic viability. So those were my 3 target things that I didn't know, because when I started, I didn't know, like, what am I running on in mental health? Sure, I guess. And then it just sort of flowed. Like, this is the stuff that I'm passionate about, and that's what I would bring to the conversations.
Fantastic. That's great. So we're going to go to Michael now. Michael, if you'll come off mute.
Hey, Sarah, congratulations on your win. I am from Richland County, South Carolina. And so I think it's very fun that you have one of those up there too. We have a lot of like our rural districts are like very big geographically here in South Carolina. I was curious if you could like talk about like the logistics of your field program. Is there, a way that, y'all found it good to, speak to as many voters as you did, knock on doors in, big, areas where, the houses aren't super close together. Phones versus texts. I was just curious how you covered so much ground talking to voters in your district, or if there's any lessons you would want to give to kind of other rural districts around the country.
I mean, I can tell you what I did. I don't really know what worked and what didn't work. I mean, what ended up being helpful and helped people tip my way, I'm not really sure, to be honest. But I'll tell you what I did. And I wish I had my campaign manager here. I did have a campaign manager that was really helpful. He had helped other campaigns, and so he knew some of the ins and outs that I didn't know. I had an account treasurer, and that was very helpful, so I didn't have to do that. And there was a lot of money that was put in this race. This race cost, you'll be shocked, I was and still am, probably at least between me and the opponent, $7 million.
Wow.
Yeah, that's shocking.
And that is because it was such an important race, and because the person I was running against is on, for us, a joint finance committee. They did not want to lose that seat, and we had the option to pick it up with the new maps. So money literally poured in. Literally poured. I mean, we had to solicit it, but so we have State Senate Democratic Committee. They helped tremendously. Our DPW, Democratic Party of Wisconsin, I don't know if you know Ben Wickler, if you've heard of him, but he, headed and helped put resources in different places. So there's a lot of money that went into it. And then we had to be strategic about what we did with that. Mailers were a big deal. And we had to think about how to strategize that. We did quite a few about choice, because the person I was running against had been for like a fetal personhood bill some time ago. And so it was like very stark, right? Like where we stand on that issue. Let's see. My husband had unfortunately suffered, had struggled with cancer at one time. And so we went through that journey with insurance and the cost. And it's actually why I ended up opening my private practice, so that we could make more money and not lose our house. And so we had that story to share. And so that was one of the things that we shared along the campaign trail. We knocked a lot of doors, but I also had to work full time because I'm not independently wealthy, and I had to work full time. And so like that, and plus I have this blended family of 6 kids. And so like, I also had to, so I would just add hours wherever I could, and weekends were like always gone. We did tons of parades. We did like pancake suppers. I did a couple of like forums with the person I was running against, did lots of interviews when I could. Like I said, I did social media. I had a postcard writing group that we just did we made one that was just had some pictures that were related to the things that are important, like rural farm, a picture of me, a picture of downtown, our little downtown. And it said public service over, I think, public service versus polarized politics or something like that.
Okay.
I tried to say, like, hey, this is who I am. And then we had, oh gosh, so many people that were willing to write those postcards. I think we did over 1,000, and we targeted those to rural areas where we probably weren't going to get to the doors. And so that was one of the strategies. One day I know I put on at least 12,000, no, I think it was like 17,000 steps. I mean, it went everywhere because it was so, it was a lot of walking from door to door. That wasn't always the case. We tried to be strategic about where we'd knocked. but there was, the money went into ads on TV. There was an ad on TV during, I don't know, one of the big, I can't remember, some of the football games. During the Packer games. Those
Wow.
cost a lot of money, but they had them against me too. Oh, somebody had asked me how I handled all the negativity. This is kind of important, I think. I was very afraid of it. I was afraid that it would be very painful. I thought it would be mean-spirited. I'm a sensitive soul. That's why I'm in the world of mental health, I think. But I think what I didn't know about myself until I got into this is like, I had a very clear moral compass. And I was pretty unflappable because really, I just thought it was silly. I thought it was, like if you're going to make fun of me, about one of them had me have this big long nose, how much I was lying about I was going to raise everybody's taxes. So I just went on Facebook and I'm like, raise your taxes. That would be raising my taxes. I'm a working class person. Do you think I want to do that? No, that's silly. I'm not. That's not where I'm at. That's not what I'm doing. That's, and so I would just kind of try to, buffer it with sort of the truth. Some of that was crazy.
You're doing fabulous here. And Michael, thank you for that question. I'm going to move us along because we're starting to get close to the hour. We've got a question from Warner and then from Monty. Warner, go ahead with your question. Come off mute, please.
Hi, Senator. Great to meet you. And
Thank you.
I work in communications for progressives and Democrats, mostly trying to reach moderates, even sometimes Republicans or unaffiliated political affiliations in rural areas. And so my challenge is to reach out to people who I might not necessarily agree with politically and try to get them on our side, vote for my candidate so that we can elect people who want to fund schools, programs that are really important to Americans. So can you talk about how you communicated your priorities and how you reach people in rural areas who may have even supported Trump?
Warner, thank you for that question, Sarah. I'm going to piggyback with a question from the chat that's very similar to Warner's question, which is, what about, did you bring values also into how you communicated, including faith values, or what was that part of your presentation to people?
I think that the way I brought in values, not in a faith base, but there is a strong faith, component in my state, but I did not lean into that. I feel like it's been a little hijacked by the right, and I just wasn't comfortable going there. I just felt like it's kind of been sabotaged. So I didn't do that. But value, I would talk about, if anything, I would talk about the collective good, really. I would just talk about like, if you do better, I do better. If I do better, you do better. We're neighbors, right? And so, not this sort of divisive, like, that saying where, it's not pie. We don't, it's not this zero-sum game kind of thing. Like, we really all can do well. There's so much resources available, really, if we are willing to kind of recognize that. I'm not against capitalism, but I also think that there's this wealth disparity. And I think everybody, especially working, like that, I guess you could be willing to deny that, but that's pretty telling, right? Like it's out there. And so, and just speaking, kind of honestly about it, I guess. I don't know that I have anything special to add.
That's great. Well, that's terrific. I'm going to go to Monty. And before I do, I'm going to say that what we'll do is after Monty's question and Sarah's response, I'm going to take a little break from Sarah just to tell you about this Ruby initiative that I think many of you will be interested in. But if you can hang on for a little longer, Sarah, there may still be a couple of minutes at the end. I got to say, I don't know what we would have done if Dan Osborne had showed up, because you've needed the whole hour.
I can feel an hour, it turns out. Yeah.
You've been terrific. So Monty, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Sarah. For the last 3 summers, I've spent some time volunteering for the Wisconsin Democratic Party, talking one-on-one with voters in rural parts of Wisconsin. And so I appreciate what you said about small towns are not being adequately heard in Wisconsin state government. And so my question is, what are the messages that you think small towns in Wisconsin would want to be sending to the state government that are not being adequately heard by state government?
Mhm. I guess I mean, one of the things, so the way that our funding strategy is for our municipalities and for our schools is much related to the property taxes. And that's been a huge issue. We have to go to operational referenda in many of our school districts. And so our small towns are being really just, you know, like not saying our larger cities aren't, but our small towns are really feeling it. And so, and because the population numbers are kind of lower, because, you know, there's not maybe as many people coming, or being born really, but also not coming to the towns, you know, there's this decrease, and we have our funding for schools connected to how many students are in the schools. So that's been a huge issue. There's been schools that have been threatening to close down or having to look at, you know, really like consolidating, things like that. And that has resonated with people in here because they understand that schools are really a cornerstone of these small towns. If you don't have a school, you know, you don't have, you know, people coming in as teachers that are going to buy the homes. You don't have the school sports that you all maybe come to. You don't have the parade, you know, for homecoming. You don't have the people maybe coming in to visit and maybe help your small businesses. You don't have maybe you know, the young people that are going to work at Subway or something like that. So there's an economic value to really thinking about boosting our small towns and how that can help. And I think, you know, just being willing to talk about that and investment in it and really understanding the importance of that, both I think culturally, but I think even economically has been something that I've talked about, and they've been grateful for that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, you've been just incredible. And if you can hang in just for a few more minutes, actually, I'm hoping that you'll be one of the people to take the bait that I'm about to float. So it's been a number of questions. I think we've gotten to most of them. There are still a few. There have been questions about how do you overcome the bad label of Democrats that they have among many rural people. You can come back to that after I'm done if you care to. I'll also say, as Eric has pointed out, that Ruby, that's again kind of a central part of what we do. So there's a lot of great stuff on our website, and our training dives deep into that. But after this election, we convened groups from across the country who are similar to us in the sense that all of them are laser focused on rural and or working class people. And all of them with differences of kind, all of them also believe that as bad as the Republican Party is, the Democratic Party has shot itself in the foot by basically ignoring, minimizing, deprioritizing, or worse, the concerns and issues of rural communities and working class people. So given that, we were very frustrated that some of the top, highest paid, most prominent Democratic consultants were still pushing an approach to the election that seemed to be kind of same old, seemed to be mostly, not entirely, tone deaf about why so many people were so pissed off and what we should do differently. And so Ruby gathered these folks, people for the Center for Working Class Politics, some great writers and thinkers, Chloe Maxman and Canyon Woodward, who run Dirt Road Organizing, lots of folks like that. And we have, after a month, 6 weeks of working on this, we now have, as of today, two things. A letter to the new DNC chair, Ken Martin, who we know, who we believe to be a fine person, and we are going to send that letter to Ken and the other new DNC officers within the next 2 weeks. And the letter essentially says, "Dear Ken, we want to work with you to really improve the fortunes of Democrats in rural and working class communities. And we think that the main step we need to do that is for you to take a chunk of what you normally spend on campaign ads, which is mostly wasted, and then invest that in long-term grassroots organizing, candidates, et cetera, in predominantly rural and working class communities. We have a whole 4-page document that sort of spells out the specifics, but the letter is a short one that basically invites Ken to work with us to flip the script and get the Democratic Party to deeply, meaningfully, and for a long term invest in the places that in fact have been neglected by the party. And we believe that will yield results not just in rural, but across the country. So that letter, we are now seeking signatories on. Sarah, we would love to have your signature on it. I will share it with you.
Thank
It
you.
has been signed so far by Ro Khanna, a progressive congressman from California, by Alan Minsky, who's the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America, by Jim Hightower, who many of you know is a sort of an icon in the world of rural. He was the Texas Commissioner of Agriculture years back, and lots of other folks. So we're asking for 2 things. One is anybody else on the call who has some weight, some say with Democrats, we would invite you to send that letter. We will, I think, Jackie, it's safe to say that we can send it around to everybody who signed up for this. We can share the letter and help us get even more signatories on it. Second thing, simultaneous with that, I'm going to look and see if the link is in the chat. We have also put a petition on Move On. And the petition is essentially a short version of the letter we're sending to Ken Martin and the DNC, but it asks for the same thing. Build the party from the bottom up, invest long-term in rural working class candidates, committees, et cetera. All of you, we hope, will sign the petition on Move On. And if I can get Jackie or Erica or somebody else to put that in the chat, the link to the petition, that would be great, because then we can get signatories on that. We're also looking for leaders of Democratic parties. I know Judy Carbone is on the call, and people who run like the Rural Caucus or state party chairs. We're looking for all of that as signatures on the letter. So it's a really exciting development. We think this is the best shot we've had in many, many years to actually help build a party from the bottom up, and one that is sensitive to and committed to rural and working people, ordinary folks. So please do. Oh, the petition link is now up. You can click on it and just put your name and information in it and help us grow that. So that's it. We are at 5 till 5. So I'll ask just real quickly, are there any questions for me before we give the ball back to Sarah? Shout them out if you have them.
Could we see the chat? I mean, could you send us the chat? I'd like to see all those comments.
Yes, I think we can do that. Yeah, I think because we're recording this, we can also include the chat. I'm going to say I think so.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. Anybody else? Okay, Sarah, back to you. Maybe 2 things in our remaining time. One is if you have any response to that question about did you have to, or how did you overcome the often negative brand that Democrats have in rural? Mm-hmm. And then perhaps just some closing remarks about your experience. I know there was one person who said, how did you balance kids and family stuff, because this individual is thinking of running, and they wondered how you did that. So maybe those 2.
Mm-hmm. How did I, with the brand? I think, the thing that I had to do is really get comfortable being a Democrat. I mean, I had to just feel proud of it. And not, I could say, oh, not everybody's perfect. Yes, there's been missteps, but I'm a proud Democrat. I believe in the policies that we're fighting for. I believe in equality. I believe in fairness. I believe in giving everybody, an equal chance and a shot at things. And so I really just had to embrace it and not be like, yeah, I know. I just felt like that's not going to work out well. And I don't feel that way. I feel very proud of the legacy of democratic values overall. Granted, we can all point to some that are like disappointing, but so I think that was it. And I was also not going to be unwilling to say, yeah, this was a mistake here or there, right? Like if you share with me something that's happened, or you feel like, the Democratic Party, and if I feel like you have a good point, I'll be like, yeah, good point. But overall, right? I mean, again, that's that binary thinking. But if we think about, okay, yeah, 5% maybe, or 10%, okay, but the 90%, right? I'm right on board and I feel very proud. So that was the kind of the way I went about it, because otherwise, yeah, they all want to bring you down and go, oh my gosh, those Democrats, not everybody, of course. And instead, I just kind of put my shoulders back, put my head up and said, yeah, darn right, I'm a Democrat. And as far as family, I think it was challenging. It was really challenging. My youngest are 14, they're twins. And I had to get them to be willing to be more independent, recognize that I wouldn't be around much, and I wasn't. I was really tired also. That was the other thing. And so I just didn't have a lot to give, to be honest. I mean, I tried my best. I didn't totally abandon them, but I was giving to my clients, I was giving to the campaign, and then I was giving to my family. And that's just a lot of balls to juggle. By the end, I had walking pneumonia and bronchitis. I mean, I was a mess by the end, but yeah, but they understood, and I mean, I just shared with them why I was doing it. I mean, I got their permission right early on. I said, sometimes you have to sacrifice for, again, the greater good. And are you guys, going to be okay with mom not being home as much? Dad's going to cook for you. And they were on board. And then every once in a while, I mean, I would check in, how are you guys doing, or I would make a point to maybe have a day with them or whatever. But it was a shared sacrifice for our family. And I think, I don't know that I ever would have done it if the need wasn't so high, if the stakes weren't so high. I don't know if, it had been, I don't know, George Bush running. I mean, at the time, I don't know that I would have ever, but Trump, I just couldn't stomach it. I was so like existentially concerned about it, and still am.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to, first of all, thank Sarah. What a spectacular presentation, and, well, non-presentation. What a spectacular not a presentation you did. Really lovely. And
Thanks for
you're
listening.
obviously so genuine. And that I'm sure that came across to the candidates, to the constituents. Not all candidates are. And you're just so natural. That's great. Want to thank all the participants. A couple of questions continue to come up. We will definitely share the recording with everybody so you can share it with friends to hear what Sarah had to say. And we will also share the petition link again in that email. I will say that the letter to the DNC, we're willing to talk with you about it, but until we actually send the actual letter to the DNC, we're going to keep the circulation tight. Like, we'd like to have you sign it, Sarah, but we're not going to broadly circulate it because we don't want Ken and the officers to sort of hear from their, kids at school that there's some letter circulating about them. We want it to go directly to them. But the petition is live. The petition can get signatures now. Anyway, this has been a fantastic time together. And Sarah, I hope our paths cross. I'll tell you that Ruby would love to support you in whatever way we can in future races, but also maybe just have some conversations with you, because we would have a lot to learn from you, and maybe we'd be a little helpful in return.
Well, first of all, thank you all for caring about rural Wisconsin. Thank you for caring about democracy and trying to spread it into the soil that is out there. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. I wasn't nearly as involved. And so I'm appreciating what you guys have been doing, obviously, for a long time. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening to somebody that's new. I don't pretend to have any answers. All I can tell you is what I did. I think the biggest thing I would say is recruit good people that care a lot. I think that was sort of because they had choices of who they could recruit for me, right? There's other people that wanted to run once they saw somebody or a seat that could have been won, and they chose me. And I feel like the other thing I'll say, which has been great, and again, I think this is leadership in my state, the Democratic leadership. They have now put me on the Education Committee, the Mental Health Committee, and the Agricultural Committee.
Wow.
So the things that I have talked about being important to me, they have heard me, they have been true to me, and now I'm on those committees, so I can give that to my constituents. This was not show. It's never been show. It's all been authentic. And I think that has resonated. So I got lucky in a way. So I don't know. It's just, I'm grateful.
Yes, excellent. Well, thank you again very much for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
And,
thanks, everybody.
We look forward to seeing you in the future, and thanks to everybody. We'll see you in March, hopefully. Bye-bye.